Welcome to the Old Time Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The Old Time Boxing Show is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation. Make sure you go to Facebook, check out Alex Ramos and Jackie. They do a great job over at the Retired Boxers Foundation. I'm your host for the show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my co-host, one of the Grueling Truth's boxing historians, Christopher Shelton. How you doing, Christopher?
Good. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll see what happens.
All right, and our other boxing historian here at the Grueling Truth, I'd like to welcome to the show, Buddy Gibbs. How you doing, buddy?
Good. How are y'all?
Oh, we're doing great.
Good.
And, of course, the big news over the last week or two in boxing, at least old-time boxing, was the pardon of Jack Johnson. I'll just let you both kind of just give your opinion of the pardon. We'll start off with Chris.
Well, my opinion is pardon, and I cover Jack Johnson a lot, and I do it through microfilm. I don't look at other people's stories. I don't do anything except my own research, and I've been handling them for years. But just to let you know, the pardon itself didn't really mean very much to me. I know they've been working on it for years. It's just that Jack Johnson wouldn't give a shit. He would care if he was alive, but he's the kind of guy that if he's dead, what good does it do him? So it didn't affect me very much because he wouldn't have cared. No, it was wrong. But what he was accused of and the way they did it was wrong, though I'm not saying Jack Johnson was an angel.
All right, buddy.
Well, I believe a lot of emotions around this situation, and I believe a lot of things in Johnson's career has been twisted even. And I think that. I think that a lot of people have the wrong idea about who he was as a man, as well as parts of his career even. And I believe that he was not only guilty under the Mann Act that was in place at the time. I think there was other charges he could have been hit with, but he never was. So that's here nor there. But
very disagree. Go ahead.
I just believe I don't believe he didn't get a fair trial like some tend to think he did. I think that he even got a light sentence. I'll even say that.
Well, he got a light sentence because he didn't do anything for that. He did other things that you can decide if it's a crime or not a crime. If you mean a prize fight, how long do you want someone in jail for a prize fight? Well, he went in for about a month for a prize fight. It's all, it is what it is. But anyway, we'll get on the subject. But what the pardon was for was okay, but I don't
Well, I'll tell you what. Real quick, I want to stop this because I'm going to keep control of this. And
okay.
Basically the first question was, what was your take on the decision to pardon him? You gave your opinion, Chris. I'm looking for Buddy's.
Sorry.
Well, with the pardon, I don't think that I don't think he should have got it. I think it was unnecessary. I think, honestly, at that point it was even the motivation for it. I think it was a political move. But besides that, on Johnson being charged, I think he was guilty of the law at hand. I think the law that was in place at the time, he was guilty. I believe he got a fair trial. I believe that there's no need for a pardon for somebody. I mean, he was guilty, in my opinion, of the charges. And with the situation at the time, and people have to understand that in Johnson's era, there was a major problem with prostitution, and it was turning into that.
Is it now?
Is it now?
No, I'm just saying, I think prostitution, Jesus had a prostitute as a girlfriend. I think prostitution's been going on for thousands of years, and it's happening now. So I don't think it shocks people that there might be a problem with prostitution at some point in anybody's era.
Well, sure, there was. And Johnson's era escalated with the access to different transportation, cars and the railroads. And at the time, there was a major issue throughout the country. He wasn't the only one at all.
It's just prostitution.
All right, real quick, let's go ahead and get this back on track because it's obvious we're not going to get to hear Buddy's entire thought uninterrupted the way we did Chris's. So what we're going to do is this. Let's go, and this is the thing, guys, for both of you. I'm just going to ask you a question. You give your opinion, and the other person will get to counteract that opinion or rebut that opinion. Christopher, what's your take on the Mann Act from the research that you've done? What was the Mann Act put in place for? Why was it there?
I think it was put in place because Jack Johnson was not only not only just black, but honestly, a high-profile person who was a smart aleck, who was a little bit of a wild person and a troublemaker, and offended a lot of people, and that he was, and I don't want to use bad language, he openly screwed white women at a time where it was not a smart thing for a high-profile black guy to do, and a lot of black people, leaders, thought, you know what, you're supposed to be a role model, and you're not being a role model, and that Jack Johnson didn't care about that stuff. And I think they didn't even put this in Congress until after he beat Tommy Burns, and it became law by President Taft before he fought James Jeffries, and that clearly a high-profile black guy and white women, it's kind of whether some people think they're a slut and a whore today if they have sex with black women. They think black women is wrong, blah, blah, blah. And some black men can't stand if you talk to a black girl. There's just a lot of stuff that suggests this particular situation was aimed at Jack Johnson.
All right, so your claim is that, so was Jack Johnson the first person that was convicted under the Mann Act?
Yes, I'm claiming that this thing was enacted because he's a high-profile guy having sex with white women, even though they were voluntary. And if you want to say he committed crimes, he sped too much in his car. He was a real smart aleck with police, which is stupid. And he was involved in illegal prize fights. He was running a tavern where, you know what, I don't know if he's carding everybody. He was certainly having sex with prostitutes, which, whether you think it's moral or not, is illegal. I'm saying the particular thing he's pardoned for was enacted. You can't just make up a charge and to put somebody in jail just because you don't like them.
So were other people, or was this just a law that was put in to get Jack Johnson? Was anybody else arrested for this act?
Oh yeah, no, it's actually a crime. It's actually not a bad law. I mean, the law itself it chooses him a pimping, that he was bringing girls, maybe even underage girls, but girls in general, across state lines to pimp them out as prostitutes. That's what he's convicted of. And I say, hey, you know what? The guy wasn't an angel, but that's not what he was doing.
All right. So what's your opinion of the Mann Act, why it was in place? Do you agree with Chris, Buddy, that it was basically the law was enacted to get at Jack Johnson?
No, I don't. He wasn't the first convicted of it. He didn't get the most time out of anybody. Effie Hoke out of Beaumont, Texas, and Basil Akadmadi's, hard name to pronounce, a New Orleans saloon keeper, was sentenced to 6 years for illegal transportation of a woman from New Orleans to Texas. Now, that was actually 3 accounts. It was 3 women, 2 years apiece, and both of them got 6 years, 2 apiece on each account, and that happened in May of 1911. There was instances afterwards. In 1914, lesser known, people, much less, quote unquote, threat to society as Johnson's, viewed as the reason why he was charged, and yet they were charged and given more time. One was given 6 months because he pleaded guilty, and another was given the same charge as Johnson, and the judge even called the verdict moderate. He believed he was being, given out an average, sentence. Also, the idea I've heard, not saying Shelton did, but that it was just white women that was looked after, and that's not true either. That was the main worry at the time, was because that was usually who was targeted, were the white women throughout the country. But there was also black prostitutes that were being used and abused, and there was even an incident of that after Johnson from another black boxer, Kid Brown. He was arrested and charged for transporting a black woman from one place to the next, and as well as draft evasion, and they went to court over it and tried it, and he was found not guilty. They dropped the charges, but they still pursued it. They pursued the case. It's hard to make a case, in my opinion, that the act was just for Johnson, when there was major issues through the country at the time of prostitution. It was really booming. It was becoming major issues. They were worried about some immigrants that come over, turning, women here into prostitutes and pimping them out, or bringing them over from other countries, which was part of the problem at the time. And one Greek man did. He come over here, and his attorney actually used his culture back home as an excuse for him doing what he did. He said that he doesn't know any better. And, of course, the judge said that doesn't matter and sentenced him. I don't see how it was for Jack Johnson when people before him was tried and given more time. People after him were tried and given more time. And even the racial factor, these were white males being charged and given more time. So it doesn't seem to me, that the case was for Johnson entirely at all. It was an issue we were having in the States at the time, and it was a law that was, broad because it was, criminal acts that were hard to tie down. They have a hard time, stopping it.
So my question would be this. I know Christopher doesn't believe there's any proof of the prostitution. Am I understanding you right there, Chris?
Right, and I was thinking about it. I'm a very civilized person. So we're going to debate and disagree about stuff. And just to point out again one more time that this wasn't even introduced into Congress until after he beat Tommy Burns and was enacted a law as signed by President Taft before the James Jeffries fight. So what Buddy's saying, and you know what, he'll say whatever he wants to say, is that his heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson, was guilty of pimping. And that's a pretty strong charge when you consider I cover this stuff in my profession. I'm blind. I can't goddamn see. I know plenty about Jack Johnson getting into trouble. But to just say, oh, he wasn't just heavyweight champion, he was a pimp, that's a pretty strong charge when there was definitely both a vendetta against him. And then I also want to say one thing with Buddy that I agree. Lots of white people liked Jack Johnson. It wasn't like this whole thing that white people just hated Jack Johnson. There were some people that didn't like him in high places, and he was a smart ass, he was a troublemaker. But a lot of white people did like him, too, when he was champion.
All right, so you're basically is the claim here that he was unfairly convicted because he didn't have a fair trial?
Yes, that there was a vendetta going on, and that he did everything. In fact, take such a lesser cut of money to fight Tommy Burns because he felt that to become a unified heavyweight champion. And remember, from 1902 to 1907, he was not only the black heavyweight champion, he was the colored heavyweight champion. He was clearly not only the best black heavyweight, but in 1908 he unified it. And that, but unfortunately, even now, when you're a high-profile person and you're a troublemaker, you're a smart aleck, and you think, I'm just going to do whatever I want to do, you're right. You could be any color, and that's going to upset people. But in his particular case, it's hard to believe that you enact a law just to arrest somebody and that you call him a pimp when I'm not sure he's a pimp. I think white girls like to have sex with him voluntarily because he's a real good-looking guy, heavyweight champion, and sometimes prostitutes also, they go by their own, their own volition.
But during after the trial, Jack Johnson said that he thought he got a fair trial.
Well, what Jack Johnson did was actually really smart. And actually, you'll appreciate this, actually, on some level. I'm not really comparing the charges with Pete Rose, that Jack Johnson finally lost the heavyweight title. He wasn't going to be able to get it back. He said, you know what, it's just better for me to go to America. Everybody's right that there's a deal worked out so that, you don't really have to, serve as much time. But like Pete Rose showed up a day early, and Pete Rose was hated. You know what, I'm going to show up, and I'm going to do this. And meanwhile, when he finished his time, he was beloved and considered the best heavyweight in history when he died. And that's not going to happen if lots and lots of white people think you're a pimp.
All right, so, Buddy, what's your take on the trial? Was it a fair trial? What evidence have you uncovered either way to say whether it was fair or not fair?
Well, I believe he had a fair trial. I believe, he had the testimonies from Bella Shriver. She said that, of course, she talked about her sexual relations with Johnson. She talked about traveling with him. She talked about traveling with him and having sex with other people for money.
She was a prostitute. That's what prostitutes do.
Sure. Well, she's being transported by Johnson, which falls under the law.
You're saying, I just want you to be clear. You're calling him a pimp because that's what he was accused of, charged, and went to jail for. Just so clearly, you're calling him
what I'm saying is
a pimp. Well, that's the charge.
What I'm saying is I believe that he was a pimp. What he was charged, though, is when he gave her the money, and he claimed that he didn't. He claimed that he had give her money. He admitted he gave her $75 he didn't say to travel. He said he gave her money. He admitted that, and there was witnesses of that saying that they heard the Schreiber girl talking about it. And Schreiber said that he gave her the money to travel. He
gave
had
him money to travel because he had money. He was a heavyweight champion, and that's what he wanted. He wanted to be the unified heavyweight champion so he could have money. He was very interested in money. It's not clear he's interested in pimping.
If she was a prostitute at the time,
right.
She was a prostitute before, she was a prostitute afterwards,
right.
And he gave her money to travel. That's where it fell into the law, where he was giving her money, and she admitted she was a prostitute at the time. He was paying for a prostitute's way to travel.
You thought he couldn't make money any other way than pimping her.
I'm sorry?
You're saying that as heavyweight champion, the unified heavyweight champion, because he's the black and colored heavyweight champion from 1902 1907, he had no other means of making money other than pimping his wife.
No, I never said he didn't have any other means. I said that was one of the things he was doing, and it's something she testified to.
That was one of the highlights of how he made money.
No, it didn't have to be a highlight. It was just something he did. He associated with prostitutes all of his life, and he even and when asked about the money, he admitted he sent her the money to travel. Yeah. But when he said that they asked him if he sent the telegram stating that he wanted her to travel, he wouldn't answer. He said he didn't remember. He said, I don't recall. He said, I don't think I did. And then he said, well, I might have sent her one. And then he said, I might have sent her one. He said, I don't know. Then maybe somebody that works for me sent her one. He didn't recall. He didn't want to answer the question. He deferred around it. Before he answered the question, he said that I might have sent her one. And the girl stated that he did. And everything she had said in that act, it was true. He admitted the money. He admitted he sent her the money. She said, and he also sent her telling her to travel. And he said, I might have. I don't know. He talked around. He didn't want to answer the question. And he even admitted
he sent her money to bring her over here. If you want to like a girl and she lives in Utah, I don't know where you live, but she lives in Utah and you want her to see her, it's not easy to say, hey, you know what? I think you should pay your own bills. I think you should do everything. If you're a guy and you have money, you say, hey, can I help with the airplane rate or something? You say, yeah, I'll help you with money. So, of course, he helps her with money to bring her over. That's what a guy does if they like a girl.
Sure. But under the law at the time, the Mann Act left it for, like I said, immoral purposes, or, it opened up the door for different things. Immoral purposes, the transport for prostitute, whether with or without consent. And she was, like I said, she was a known prostitute at the time, and he sent her there. And Schreiber's testifying. She's testifying that that's what he sent her there for, and he sent her to travel. Under the law, that is breaking the Mann Act. That's in the law. He gave her money, and she's a prostitute to travel.
He sent her to be around him. It's not clear that he sent her because he met up with these guys and was going to hook them up with and pimp around. Yeah, maybe you wouldn't do that. We're just different. But, yes, if I want to be around a girl, I might want to say, hey, you know what, let me pitch in. Let me see if I can help you get out there, or let me pay money to get out and see you, or whatever. You're saying that you just make a girl pay for everything if you go out with her. If you go out with her.
I'm saying he paid money for a prostitute to travel who testified that her intent.
His intent was that she'd be around him.
No, her intent on the jury paper that I read today was to basically she was getting paid by people to have sex.
Yeah, that's what she testified. And she also said that Johnson gave...
May 17th, 1913, Chicago Defender.
I'll tell you this, that because I know this is not, I'm not embarrassed, I don't care, but, I've lived in Tijuana and I've lived on the border, and I know a lot of illegal prostitutes and stuff, and it's pretty hard to mix the war and the stock. Again, it's not clearly pimping. And the one thing I'll say is, and then I want Buddy to have a chance to talk, and I'm sorry if I sometimes I'm not really into all that, Jack. I hate Ken Burns. I hate that shit. I hate this whole, lying about Jack Johnson's image and all kinds of things. I'm not protecting him. If they say bad things about Bill Cosby, Mike Tyson, who else? I don't know. Anyway, there's proof on those guys. And with Jack Johnson, you're really just dealing with a rascal. He's like I said, he's the worst smart-ass. When when the police pull you over, be nice to him. Don't be a shit-ass with him. But he was, and you get people mad when you do that. Now everybody talk. I'm sorry.
Well, buddy.
It's kind of hard for him to argue when he my thing is he admitted he gave the money. He said he may have sent a telegram telling her to travel as a prostitute. She was a working prostitute. That falls under the act. And on top of it, as you said, the Chicago Defender, who was openly biased toward Johnson, they backed into his career for decades. Even after Johnson, they were the leading press for African-American civil rights. They even stated he got a fair trial. That's all we could ask for. It was fair. Johnson himself, at the end, admitted he thought he got a fair trial. He didn't agree with the verdict, but he said, I thought he got a fair trial. His lawyer even talked about that he was, he knew he had a hard case there. He thought he could get the win, but he even stated there was a lot of evidence there. On top of the Shriver's testimony, you had the chauffeurs that one of his chauffeurs admitted to driving her around for Johnson from different places. And the testimonies of both them, the only way that you could say that Johnson wasn't doing, it wasn't bringing a prostitute across state lines.
How come you won't say the word pimping since that's the charge, but you refuse to call this man a pimp?
No, the charge was him transporting her, but I do think he was a pimp. The charge was him paying her way to be transported from one place to another while she did immoral acts. And he admitted to giving the money for her to travel, and even said he might have sent her a telegram, but he wouldn't answer it. He refused. He said, I might have. He said, I don't know. And then he said, he refused to talk around.
I would recommend it anyway. Don't talk shit to the police. You talk to your lawyer, and the lawyer does the talking, and you shut up when your lawyer does the talking. That would be my recommendation to most people, because it's not a good idea to talk to the police. And I just think he handled it well. He handled it like Pete Rose. You know what? I'm just going to go ahead and do it and do my time and do it as well as I can. He's a social guy, and I'm not protecting him. And then when it was over, he was really beloved, and he was the most beloved boxer when he died. And I don't think that happens if white people think a black man's been pimping out white women, that's necessarily going to be okay, except...
Yeah, but I think this, Chris, I think everybody wants him to be great. I think everybody wanted him to be a hero, but he was the exact opposite. He did more to set back his race than about anybody ever could. I mean, he refused to fight the best black fighters. There's no way he was not going to fight him. You can find all kind of quotes from him on that. He has basically been mystified with everything he had. Come on, most people think that Stanley Ketchel, that fight was set up.
It was set up.
It was not.
No, there's no way that fight was set up.
It was not. The reports don't support it.
No,
that was
you guys are playing around. You guys are playing around. You remember, I'm also, not anymore a cyber boxing zone, but I was one of their two best researchers under their chief historian, and you can't play games with stuff like that. They really make you force where you get your information. And, you didn't see in that fight, and actually I'm glad it's on film, that he accidentally knocks Ketchel down and grabs him and picks him up off the floor. And it was common at the time. I don't even know if you guys even know, Theodore Roosevelt banned prize fighting in New York, and he loved boxing more than anybody. But this thing was getting out of control with the rigging of the fights, the gamblers and such, and the filming. Because filming, which is what they were doing here, you sort of make it look a certain way because you travel and do exhibitions and then show these films, what they call the moving pictures. So Ketchel was a real good fighter. I'm not denying, but he was smaller than Johnson, and Johnson got really pissed off when Ketchel pulled a fast one and landed a punch.
But he
landed more than one punch in that fight. Go ahead.
They had slugged it out before. He had bloodied Ketchel's face all up in the first couple of rounds and dropped him. It busted him up. Ketchel, what Johnson was doing is the same thing he did with Burns and Jeffries. He was toying with him, and then he got clipped. He made up the whole getting dropped thing as Ketchel going off the script after Ketchel couldn't dispute it anymore, after he was dead. It was, the fight details before that don't support it. It shows that Johnson and him were going at it, and there was plenty of heavy blows landed, but Johnson was just toying with him.
Yes, he was toying with him because it's a fixed fight.
No, he did the same. Was Burns fixed? Was Jeffries fixed?
No.
No, that's all he did was the same thing.
Except with Burns, let me just finish this. With Burns, they were being careful at the time to try to avoid Burns being knocked out on film, and they were trying to avoid that. That doesn't mean the fight was fixed. It just means that they were trying to be careful about a knockout at that time, which raised the divide. You guys are I'm not going to say anything upsetting, but it's totally untrue that Stanley Ketchel, who's one of the greatest fighters in history, had a chance against Jack Johnson. And you guys want to claim it. Jack Johnson's a pimp, and Stanley Ketchel was a better boxer. That's just...
Nobody claimed he was a better boxer. Who claimed that?
It sounds like that's what Buddy's saying. He's saying that.
No.
Because Jack Johnson kicked his ass, so I don't know.
What I'm saying is quite the opposite. What I'm saying is quite the opposite. Johnson was a better fighter, but the whole idea of it being fixed isn't true. He was toying with him like he did Tommy Burns. And there's even pictures of Ketchel bloodied and busted all up in the second and third rounds, and he'd been dropped before. Johnson was doing like he did with everybody, Burns and Jeffries and all. He'd beat him up, hold him up, smile to the crowd, and let him know you're not in my league. That's what he was doing. Not a fix, though.
Well, so, Buddy, go ahead and tell me, because you seem to know so much more about me than this stuff. So you're saying that Jack Johnson didn't know anything about negotiating movie rights, or that movies were the number one form of making money in 1909. You know that, obviously.
Yeah.
What's that got to do with anything?
Well, who's the first person to direct a movie that made money, and who's the first movie actor in history? Name it. You know so much. You must know this. Cyber boxing, just throw me out the goddamn window if I don't know it.
Hey, you know what? I mean, this is beyond what this should have been. I mean, I don't know why you would use the Lord's name in vain when you know I don't care if you say fuck or whatever, but you don't say that on my show.
Well, okay. I'm just saying, incidentally, but I say he knew this. It was Thomas Edison in 1894. First movie actor was James Corbett, and that James Corbett sued and received residuals.
Yeah, I think everybody pretty much knows that listens to this show.
I didn't realize. I didn't hear you guys say it, so we didn't
say it because I didn't even know why it was relevant to what we're talking about.
Because I don't think you realize that this is a movie and you say these things, and that Theodore Roosevelt banned prize fighting for a reason, considering he was our best boxing president and loved boxing the most. There's a reason they banned prize fighting in New York.
Okay, so can you tell me what that has to do with the Stanley Ketchel-Jack Johnson fight?
Because the whole idea is that Stanley Ketchel was going to do an exhibition and show that he lasted 20 rounds with Jack Johnson. And he does exhibitions. You show a movie. It's almost like vaudeville. It's sort of like entertainment. And then Stanley Ketchel was the great boxer he is, one of the greatest in history. Pulled a fast one, at least in Jack Johnson's mind. He pulled a fast one, knocked him down, and Johnson got up within like 3 seconds and just broke Stanley Ketchel's face and knocked his teeth down. And then, it is what it is. But that doesn't mean it isn't fixed as far as that's why Theodore Roosevelt banned boxing, is because there was confusion to gamblers. Because gamblers didn't know that, hey, this thing is just meant to go 20 rounds so that Stanley Ketchel can move around and show movies and do exhibitions, and Jack Johnson gets a paycheck without having to do anything.
But the fight reports don't show that. It shows them going at it, throwing hard blows. Ketchel's busted up early. He's dropped a couple times before the knockout, and it shows them going at it. It doesn't show them fighting, an exhibition. It mentions them trading hard blows, and Johnson basically is toying with him. Then he goes to duck a shot and gets clipped, and then gets pissed off. I'm not saying Ketchel's in his league because he's not, which is why a lot of fans are pissed off at the fight. They were pissed off that he was taking a fight with Ketchel, and it was, reported even afterwards. They talked about it, which is one reason why he took on Ross, because he wanted to show people he could beat up a bigger opponent after people complained so much about him fighting Ketchel. Even Jimmy DeForest.
Jack Johnson. Oh, go ahead.
Huh?
I was going to say, you could definitely criticize Jack Johnson that he was certainly part of all this. That wasn't making it clear. If nothing else, the gamblers. The gamblers think this thing is a fair fight, and they don't know in advance, and you have a lot of trouble if one side thinks, you know what, we didn't know that there was an advance thing going on. And and it wasn't it's not really rigged. It's just, you do exhibitions and show these movies, and it makes money. And then, you don't really have to do that much. And it's harmless, except for gamblers, really. But Theodore Roosevelt thought it wasn't harmless and said, you know what, I'm getting rid of it. And he banned it.
But my only thing is, if they were going to the exhibition to go the full rounds, why the hell were they going so full force? And like I said, the first couple rounds, Johnson had busted Ketchel up and dropped him even. His face was smeared with blood.
And picked him up. He knocked him down. He picked him up off the ground and put him back on his feet.
Sure, like he did Burns and everybody. He would hold on to him, and they go to drop. He did it to Jeffries, too. He did it to inflict punishment. That was Johnson showing off. He always did. Even in his sparring sessions, he liked to show off like that. He liked to he not only beat the person, but look good. Sam McVeigh talked about it. He said he sparred with Johnson in front of the crowds, and, of course, he was going through the motion to let Johnson do what he was doing, and he started getting too arrogant and showing off too much, and McVeigh said, I went at him. I let him have it. They started really going down.
You tell me, buddy, and again, I'm trying to be I just get excited. Don't worry if I, get excited too much. That's me. But then why did since you know more than me, apparently, why did Theodore Roosevelt ban, as governor of New York, why did he ban prize fighting in New York? And you can tell the audience this as if I don't know.
Well, it doesn't. Well, yeah, because of the event that happened. But what I'm saying is, with the fight reports going into the Johnson fight don't support an exhibition. If they were planning on going through the rounds, what I'm saying is the actual reports from the actual fight, it doesn't support it as if the first knockdown was the first hard blow landed. That, according to the report, it wasn't the first hard blow landed by either man. Both men had exchanged hard shots. It just doesn't support that they were trying to go the full distance, is what I'm saying right off the fight report. It doesn't support it.
Let me say this because I think we can agree on this. Stanley Ketchel was a hell of a middleweight and one of the greatest of all time. And if he was Jack Johnson's size, whether each was taller or smaller, it might have been a hell of a fight. But Jack Johnson had a tremendous physical advantage and utilized it.
Well, I don't think that Ketchel ever had a chance with him. I mean, I think he clipped him, but Johnson got up, and although he dropped him, he wasn't. I'm not saying he was about to be knocked out, but he got clipped and dropped. What I'm saying is, I don't think that was off of. I don't think that was off the script. I don't think that they ever.
I agree. When the way Jack Johnson gets up, he's revealing in some way his real personality. Because the Jack Johnson who tried to be out in public was pretty sociable, gets along with people, really gets along with people. And when Ketchel hit him, that's a real punch. He knocks Jack Johnson down. And I don't care. Nobody can accidentally knock Jack Johnson down. He's so much smaller. Ketchel hit him, and Ketchel can hit hard. He's a knockout artist. And Johnson gets up with a rage that he's actually revealing his real self, in a sense, that this is a real anger guy who just realized you go through life maybe not being so angry. And Mike is absolutely right. One thing you hold against Jack Johnson is he used the color line after he beat Tommy Burns. And he didn't fight so hard or train so hard and things like that. All of it you can hold against Jack Johnson. And Stanley Ketchel knocking Jack Johnson down is no accident. It's not in script. And that's a bad decision, but also a tribute to Stanley Ketchel's power as a boxer.
I just don't think that the fight at all was scripted. I think that Johnson was just toying with him, and he got arrogant and slipped up, and he got clipped, and then he got up pissed off and said, I'm not going to play anymore, and he finished Ketchel off. That's the last of it.
Well, how about this, Christopher? What leads you to believe the fight was fixed?
Well, because I've read the story of first of all, I know the story of boxing and movies, and that you're negotiating. And Thomas Edison was the first one that did it, that you sort of negotiated so that people, they look a certain way. And there's two ways to show it. There's this way to show it sort of in front of the public in general, where it gets distributed. And then there's just what Ketchel's situation is. You do exhibitions. You go to various places. And that's, of course, what Jack Johnson did that you can hold against him. All the boxers did it. Is after you win a heavyweight title, you don't just walk in and fight somebody and lose the title. You fight a bunch of these exhibitions, and then you can show a movie, or somebody will come up and do jokes, or somebody will sing a song, and you make it almost like an entertainment event. And that was just very popular at the time, and Theodore Roosevelt thought it's a really bad idea because the corporate was involved in this stuff too, especially that, the gamblers are getting confused because you're not making it clear to them that this is an exhibition. They think it's a real fight, and there's a real problem when the losing side of the gamblers find out, you know what, this is not a real fight.
So from your research, did the newspaper reporters, did they think it was a real fight, or did they tell everybody it was an exhibition?
I say that it sort of more came out. It was not revealed ahead of time. It was more something that came out after the fact. And in fact, Jack Johnson himself negotiated his film situation with James Jeffries. He did it himself. He actually fired his manager, though it didn't get shown because the wrong person won and stuff. Actually, the irony of that fight is that Jack Johnson would have made more money if he had lost the fight than winning it, at least at that moment.
All right, so, Buddy, just give us what you found out that makes you think it wasn't a fixed fight.
Well, the money for Ketchel, if he was going to make any money other than off the film, would have been to knock out Johnson. He would have made more money off of that. As far as going the limit, he wouldn't have made it. He'd even offered up a side bet before with Johnson. And going by the reports of the actual fight itself, they weren't holding back. I mean, Johnson was toying with Ketchel, sure, but he was nailing him too. There's pictures of Ketchel in the early rounds with his face bloodied all up. It does, and he had dropped Ketchel twice before, and then you can see, even in the film before he's dropped, Johnson's having, it's an easy night for him, which is what he figured on. He figured that it would be an easy fight, right. And from a style standpoint, it is, but I don't think that it was a scripted fight. I think Johnson took the fight thinking it was an easy. I don't think it was an easy. I don't think he thought. I thought he thought it was going to be an easy defense. But from the reports, they were landing hard.
I don't see. It was planned in advance, but the last round wasn't planned.
Well, all of Johnson's defenses were easy because he handpicked them. I mean, he avoided the top challengers. He admitted that. He said, I'm not going to fight any first-class fighters. He told Representative to Victor Breyer that I'm not fighting any first-class fighters. I'm only going to fight, second tier below. But I think with the Ketchel fight,
well, I never saw that quote, but I'll agree with Mike. He did draw the color line, which meant that he did keep certain fighters who could have had a potential chance against them. And when he takes a guy on like Fireman Jim Flynn, which is a heavyweight championship fight, you're not really giving the best fighters their chance, black or white. So we agree on that.
But even the color line, he drew Sam Langford, Joe Jeanette. Yeah, well, I'm not saying he did draw it. I think he drew I'm not fighting any top challengers line because he fought battling Jim Johnson in France. And the same time that they fought within a day, Sam Langford and Joe Jeanette fight it out. And that fight does twice the amount. Nobody wanted to see Johnson take on the easier opponents. He took on Battle and Johnson, but he wouldn't fight the top two guys who had to fight each other instead. Johnson didn't want to fight anybody that was a threat to him because of all the benefits that the title brought him.
I agree.
But I think with the Ketchel fight, I think with going by the reports, Johnson was, trying to toy with Ketchel like he did Burns and everybody else. And he busted Ketchel up. He busted Ketchel up early. The second and third rounds, he was bloodied. He dropped him twice. If they're going to go the 20-round limit, why would he bust him up in the first 2 or 3 rounds and then drop him thereafter a couple of times? It just it doesn't seem like if you're going to go the exhibition bout, which a lot of times they did, like you said, they usually didn't sit in there and slug it out like that. It wasn't the guy was they'd go through the motions and it'd be like a sparring match, but that's not how the details of the fight describe it. It describes them.
Let me agree on this, so we can agree, and I can agree with us too, is that Jack Johnson did what a lot of heavyweights did, which is not okay, just because other people do it doesn't make it right, is that they sometimes should be taking on tougher foes after they become the unified champion. Remember, he was already the black and the colored heavyweight champion, but as a unified champion, he avoided maybe some of the tougher fighters at that point because he wasn't as hungry, he wasn't training as hard, he wanted to screw around and party and have a good time, and that he would have been more vulnerable. And just because other heavyweights have done it, Jack Dempsey did, a lot of them have done it, doesn't make it okay.
Yeah, sure, a lot of guys did. Even
I guess.
They are. Johnson's not the only one. It definitely happened, especially considering a lot of them would just flat out not defend at all. That happened a lot, which is where eventually, Dempsey, held the title. He wouldn't defend. But, and that's why later on they changed the law and they wanted the rules and wanted a champion to defend within 6 months or within reason. In other words, if they get a, proper offer, you can't go in there and offer them chicken scratch and expect them to take it. But, that's where the idea come from, was from fighters, before doing that. I'm just, the idea, Johnson was one of the worst ones for it, what I'm saying. And I think a lot of it gets twisted even with his legacy as far as being the champion. I always separate Johnson the fighter, Johnson the champion, and Johnson the man. Johnson the fighter was excellent. Johnson the champion was poor. Johnson the man.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Johnson the man, it was even worse. I mean, he was a nasty man outside of the ring and remained that way all of his life. Even meeting a young Jersey Joe Walcott, he was, a nasty person. He's an asshole. But even his title defenses, he even tried to talk around it as if he wasn't, at times, like he wasn't avoiding guys, and then other times he would admit it and say, I'm just not taking them. And I think sometimes it gets twisted as if there was no money involved, which is his main motive for not taking the bouts, and that's not what it was. Johnson has even said that on several occasions. He didn't want to fight Joe Jeanette or Sam Langford or even Sam McVeigh, because they were a threat.
Well, he certainly beat him when he did fight them. The only one that lost to was Joe Jeanette, and that was a disqualification foul. It was announced about an hour after the fight, and then he went back and fought Jeanette and beat him. Let me throw this question at you, just because I know you're going to get it wrong. You're going against somebody here. What year did Jack Johnson become heavyweight champion? You tell me the year, since you know so much more than me.
What do you mean, when he became the heavyweight champion?
What year? Yeah, what year?
What, for the world, 1908?
So you're saying that even though he was denied the opportunity as a black man, he was black heavyweight champion.
I'm sorry, Shelton, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I'm thinking from 1902 to 1907, he was the best black heavyweight, and he wasn't given a chance for the unified champion. And I believe that by the time he fought Tommy Burns, he was already slightly over the hill, and then he really messed up things by not training hard and partying and being a wild man, all kinds of things. So I think he might be, I'm not overrated, but he wasn't overrated between 1902 and 1907. But by after 1908, he was already a little bit over the hill, and then he just didn't train or fight or really do anything except party and have a good time.
Well, actually, I think that Johnson's one of the ones that he peaked late, in my opinion. I'm not saying like I'm not going back saying he peaked with Jess Willard or anything like that. I mean that he was one of those fighters that got better with time. I think he got better. I'm not saying that he wasn't even the best black fighter at the time when he got the title. I think he deserved his title shot. Just to clarify, I'm not saying right. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that a lot of, another thing that's left out is it's mentioned he fought those men before that I mentioned, but they were all before their prime. Sam McVeigh was even a kid. And Jeanette, he admitted, even in those fights when he was a novice, Johnson admitted his style was a headache for him, similar to Ali and Norton. And yet here Jeanette was as a novice fighter, and even then he gave him a lot of issues. And Johnson admitted he didn't want to fight Jeanette once he hit his prime. He said it in a quote that I don't want to fight Joe Jeanette over a long bout, 20 rounds or plus, because I'm confident he could beat me. If you let me fight Frank Morin for you, then I'll take that fight. But he didn't want to fight Jeanette. He said that he thought, which a lot of people agreed with him, even Langford said Jeanette was probably the best fight to the finish fighter out there at the time. The longer you fought the guy.
He couldn't beat Jack Johnson before 1908 except once on a disqualification. And we agree essentially, I think, that after 1908, after he beat Tommy Burns, that those guys would have been more formidable against Jack Johnson because they were younger, they were hungry, and the title was everything, and Jack Johnson's older and goofing around. So, yes, those guys would be more formidable. But Jack Johnson, between 1902 and 1907, when he was hungry, was great, but by the time 1908, by the time he got the title, he was already a little bit over the hill, and then he wasn't hungry. And some of those guys he beat now were still hungry and could have possibly, and they weren't given a chance, could have beat him.
I think I think a lot of them were at that time a threat, and I think it goes back and forth depending on which year. I'm not going to go back and forth on that, but which year you're talking, which one would have had more of a chance against him than the other. But I actually think that he peaked right before the Burns fight, and then right on up through it, and then he steadily went on his decline like most fighters do. But with his defensive style, he performed towards the best level for a long period of time. It's like looking at Archie Moore and saying, well, yeah, his best was at this time, but really, the guy he performed at the top level throughout his career. But, with here, Johnson's the champion. These guys were the top contenders and in line for his title. When he beat them, it was before their prime. The champion, even if he's going past his prime, he should still have to fight his top guys.
Well, those must agree. I'd say that by the time he beat Tommy Burns, he was at the end of his peak, and the fight against James Jeffries, well, he did train hard. He still came in overweight. It's just James Jeffries came in way overweight and didn't train as good. So Jack Johnson, had one more good fight, really good fight in him, but also he did come into that fight overweight. And that we both agree that by the time he fought Tommy Burns, if that wasn't his peak, it was the end of his peak. His peak was somewhere around 1904, 1905, and that Tommy Burns was pretty much the end of his peak, but it was the beginning of his notoriety.
I think, I'm falling into a little bit later of his peak. What I'm saying his peak is I actually think he was right around his best with Burns. I think that went on for a few years, and then until as he got older, 1914 and all, when he fought Frank Moore, and he was definitely not at his best, and I think from on that time up, Jess Willard, of course, even battling Jim Johnson, I don't think he was at his best, but right on up from, a couple of years before Burns up until that point, I think was his best time because he was one of those guys that got seasoned. He found out all his tricks and his, craftiness as he developed. And it does depend.
I'm just going to say, I don't know what we'll ever know exactly Jack Johnson would have done with, say, James Jeffries in 1904 because Jeffries didn't fight him then. But that's, in the area of where Jack Johnson was at his peak. And he really continued from 1902, 1907. Very hungry to fight Tommy Burns and get this title. And then totally should be discredited, just like Mike said, avoiding the better heavyweights, black and white, because he didn't want to let go of the title. And unfortunately, other heavyweights do that. And I don't know if it's the right or wrong thing to do because, once you see some money, I don't know. But from a boxing standpoint, you have to hold it against him for his legacy.
Yeah, like I said, he's not the only one to do it. But my only issue is essentially he really didn't fight any of those top guys throughout years. And,
the black guys. From 1902 to 1907, he fought everybody and dominated them all. He only lost one to Jeanette in a disqualification call, which doesn't mean he didn't lose. It just means Jeanette didn't actually – it's still a loss. Disqualification loss is a loss.
I think it's really pushes to say he dominated everybody from 1905 to 1907.
No,
he did? You got a draw with Billy Dunning. He had a draw with Joe Giannetti, which most of the things I read about said Giannetti won. He won a close decision over Giannetti. Won another close decision over Giannetti. Had a no contest, no decision over Giannetti. Won a close decision over young Peter Jackson. Lost to Joe Giannetti November 25th of 1905, I think it was. I know it was by disqualification, so it can't count. It's just like the Stanley Ketchel knockdown doesn't count because it was fixed. It's just like he never really lost to Jess Willard because it was fixed. It wasn't. He just got beat by a guy that wasn't very good because he was old.
That wasn't fixed. That was sort of, he agreed to the rules, and the rules were sort of against him, but he agreed to the rules, and that's not the same thing as a fix.
Yeah, and Marvin Hart beat him in 1905 also.
Yep.
So, I don't know how he dominated everybody from 1905 to 1907 because there's six guys right there with questionable draws or wins.
And unfortunately, actually, I let Buddy. Let me let Buddy talk, and then I'll say something. I'm sorry, I don't want to keep you road.
Well, my thing is,
go ahead.
Like I said, I mean, even in that time frame, when he beat these guys, even with Jannetty and the others, McVeigh was a kid. Joe was a novice, and he gave Johnson a lot of problems, even with the disqualification. Some think Johnson took it as a way out. He wanted it as a way out of the fight. It was a lot better than getting beat or knocked out, possibly.
No.
And with Joe, Johnson admitted openly, fighting the novice version of Joe that he did, and he was a novice. He said he had a hard time with him. He said his style was too hard for him. He said it was too hard of a style for him. And Jannetty even he'd even commented on how he knew how to break Johnson's style. Johnson did his best work in the clinches, and he knew how to break that style. Johnson even admitted it was basically he was saying he was the Norton to his Ali. He couldn't deal with his style. He was a headache, and that was just the novice version. And Langford. Of course, who he beat, that the decision wasn't disputed, but he had problems with him. And he was a lot smaller than Johnson and hadn't physically filled out himself yet. Not even the size. He wasn't at his physical best weight. And Johnson admitted he was too strong and hit too hard. He didn't want to take a chance on fighting him and getting knocked out. My thing is he purposely avoided the only serious contenders he had at the time. And when he did beat them before, in the time frame you're talking about, they were novices. McVeigh was literally a kid, and he still had trouble with them. Even with Langford, it's often mentioned with him, but Joe was another. He openly admitted he had a hard time with his style. He didn't want any part of him. He openly admitted he ducked him.
Well, let me say this. Because actually I was one of the leaders on this. This is before Ray Rice knocked out his future wife in the elevator. With John L. Sullivan. I like John L. Sullivan, but I was one of the first people at Cyber Boxing Zone to say, hey, you know what, this guy's got some attitude issues involving women and people in general, and I like him as a boxer. I think these things have to be mentioned because they weren't being mentioned before. So anything involving Jack Johnson, I think is that you don't like him because you think he's a pimp, and that's influencing what you're saying. And believe me, I'm not gonna protect somebody who injures women. I'm not even supposed to really get too involved emotionally. I'm an emotional person, but I'm not protecting somebody. It just sounds like you don't like them.
It's not a matter of not liking him. Like I said, you got to separate any fighter from those three things. How was he as a fighter? How was he as a man? How was he as a champion? As far as a fighter, Johnson is superb. And honestly, in my opinion, considering the rounds, the gloves, the rules at the time, et cetera, in my opinion, Johnson's the best defensive heavyweight of all time. I know a lot of people disagree with that, but in my opinion, he is.
Right.
That's I mean, he was punch catching and snatching punches out of the air with those little ass gloves. If somebody's not impressed with that, I don't know what to tell them. I mean, he was basically using some of the techniques, and I'm not comparing them exactly. I'm just saying there was little parts like being able to slide straight back from shots and catch things with his gloves, like even Ali did. He had great timing, he had great speed and all. But my only thing is, it's just my only thing was as a fighter, he was fantastic. As a champion, I think he was poor. I think he was one of the worst ones. He avoided any type of challenge, and he openly admitted it, which is the reason why other countries wanted to strip him. For one, they said this guy can't hold on the title forever and not defend against anybody.
Right, except, and I'll agree with you, from 1908 to 1915, that's not really a very good period, even though that's his notoriety. I'm just saying he was still the heavyweight champion from 1902 to 1907. It's just he was the black heavyweight champion and the colored heavyweight champion, but not viewed as the unified heavyweight champion.
What about James Jeffries?
James Jeffries probably should have fought him around 1904, and I feel kind of bad about James Jeffries. And he probably should have fought Blackman and stuff, and you have to hold it against him too. But by the time he came back, it became such a racial issue. He was way out of shape. He really had no business going into Jack Johnson.
Yeah, but I mean, so do you not consider James Jeffries ever the heavyweight champion of the world?
Oh, I do. I just think that in his time, that somebody like Frank Childs was also the colored and the black heavyweight champion, and so is George Byron.
But you can't have two champions.
Separate them. Yes, you can. Because
no, you can't. You cannot have two world champions. That is just asinine and stupid. We see that all over sports today.
Oh, thank you, Mike.
Or all over boxing. How the hell are you going to have two different world champions?
Because black people had a right to have a heavyweight champion, and they were denied it, and so they have a right to call who they say is the heavyweight champion.
Well, it doesn't mean the title's not there, but they're not the world champion.
You're both talking at once.
You had a white champion and you had a black champion, then there was no world champion during that time.
You could argue that. I mean, I'm just saying that I separate.
That's what I'm arguing, because I don't believe in this two world champion bullshit. And the thing is this, all sports before 1950 are skewed by this. We don't know what Babe Ruth does if he plays against the best black athletes. We don't know what Josh Gibson does if he's facing the best pitchers of the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. We don't know. So because of that racism, we don't know who was actually the greatest players of that time. We don't know if Babe Ruth was that great. We don't know if Ty Cobb was that great. We don't know if Satchel Paige was that great. The only thing we can do is project what would have happened.
I agree.
But the one thing that cannot be denied is the fact that Jack Johnson was a pimp. He transported him, and he should not have been pardoned.
Well, the only thing I'd say is that just believe me, and I know you guys maybe don't believe me, I'm not a defender of Jack Johnson doing anything wrong, and I'm not claiming that I was mean or I think he's a personable person. He's a very social guy, but I'm not defending him because he's black, and I'm not defending him because I want to protect his legacy. I don't care about the pardon. I mean, I think he would care. He doesn't care, except for his family members. Why do other people care?
I don't think his family members care. I think it's just some way to get your name back in, and I think it's some way for Donald Trump to show that he's not a racist. I think it's all bullshit.
The major thing is
bullshit.
You shouldn't give it to him just because. Does he deserve it? That should be the question. Should he be pardoned? Should he be pardoned for the crimes? And I don't think so. He admitted in court, like I said, on giving the money for her to transfer for a prostitute, and he deferred on the answer when he said whether he told her to travel or not. Where his chauffeur said that Johnson had got him to travel, send the girls around plenty of times, and she was a working prostitute at the time, and even she said that he gave gave her about $2,000 to set up as a madam and a prostitute in an apartment, and Johnson's team admitted that he gave her the money, around $2,000, but they just denied, and they said it was a gift from a friend, that he gifted her $2,000. Now he's not associated with her, right? And now he's giving her $2,000 for a working prostitute who set up a place, another brothel, and she continued to do so. She was found. She was a prostitute when they found her. That was her career, and he's giving her money, and she's telling him why that he gave her money. He gave me the $75 to travel so I could do this. He gave me $2,000 so I could set up a brothel, and he furnished it and everything. The only way you can deny the case is that you believe everything Jack Johnson says and nothing anybody else says. That's the only way you can say that he wasn't guilty. The only argument is if you say, well, he didn't have a fair trial. According to the Chicago Defender, who was openly biased towards him, he did. And they said that's all they could ask for, as long as he had a fair trial. Even Johnson admitted he didn't like the verdict, but he was satisfied with the case. Of course, he, tried to fight it and go for a retrial, and I've heard that argued too when he wasn't granted a retrial. But one of the first couples that was charged before Johnson sent out for a retrial as well, and they were denied as well. They went after if it was constitutionally right later on, which a lot of others did, and the Supreme Court upheld the Mann Act and said it was at the time. My thing is a lot of people on that, they look at, and I know I'm getting long-winded, that they don't like the idea of the law looking at it now, but you got to look at it in the time that it was there, why it was set up.
I think the law is good. I mean, I think it was set up with an agenda, but I think the law itself is good. I think the idea that transporting people for prostitution, which they do from other countries, it's wrong. I mean, I prefer if a woman wants to be a legal prostitute, it's her own choices and her own decisions, but I don't like anybody transporting somebody for prostitution. It's a good law. I just thought there's an agenda to it. And, Buddy, I just hope when you write your story, since you call Jack Johnson a pimp, say the word pimp in your story. Don't play around.
I'm not. What I'm speaking of when I say that why he shouldn't get a pardon is for what's there. I believe he was a pimp. What I'm saying is, from what he said in the courtroom, was he transported the woman. I'm not trying to mix up the two. In other words, I'm not trying to say, this is what they tried him on. They found him for him giving them the money and her transporting while she's a prostituting across state lines. That in itself doesn't mean he's a pimp. It means that he helped a prostitute transport from one place to the next, which is still against the law. The law at the time. What I'm saying is, from the other testimonies and from the other things that I've seen, I believe he was a pimp. I believe that he made money off of him. Of course, he had sex with them. We know that. Which others did. I'm not, like I said, he's not feeling.
Someone had sex with a prostitute. What a shocker.
Yeah, that's the old age way to make some money. But what I'm saying is, when I call him a pimp, I think he was a pimp. I think all the information surrounding him. I think his brothel at the top. His cafe doubled as a brothel at the top for some time. I think that he put the money up for Schreiber to open a house of her own, and which she testified to. And Johnson's own team said that he did give her the money. They just didn't admit to the intent. And he admitted that he sent her the money. He just didn't admit that he told her to travel, although he said he might have told her that. And I believe he got a fair trial on it. The Chicago defender said it. Johnson himself said it. He just didn't like the verdict. And even the lawyer admitted that it was a lot stacked against him in that case, that it was a hard case to beat with all the evidence there.
Yeah, my other thing here is this, and this is for either one of you. If this law was set up to take him down, once they got him, why did they give him a less harsh sentence than a lot of other people that were found?
What doesn't make sense to me.
Both, I agree. Both, Mike, I agree with what you said.
It just doesn't make sense. Like you said, and if they were out to get him to take his title, it would have been much easier to get a disqualification with him during the fight.
He had to fight with Philadelphia Jack O'Brien that was scored a draw. I think he's second or third title defense that a lot of newspapers thought O'Brien won. They could have easily taken his title then.
They could have. It would have been much easier than creating a law through Congress, going to get the evidence, getting a trial. They could have just taken it in the ring. That kind of stuff happens all the time, especially back then.
Especially now too.
Now too, exactly. It would have been much easier if they were out to get Johnson. Why were there ones convicted before him who got more time, and they were white citizens that were no, quote unquote threat to society? They got more time. They were sentenced before him. There was ones after him. I've heard, like I said, that it was just white women, which was usually the issue at the time, was mostly white prostitutes. There were black prostitutes, too, that were, a major issue. Like I said, they had a black boxer years after Johnson that was charged with, bringing a black prostitute across the line. It wasn't a racial law. It was a broad law that was used to attack the issues they were having at the time. It was basically what was done in this country before 1930 is everybody tried to impose their morals on everybody else. That's how you got prohibition. That's how you got all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And once they found out that it caused more physical violence to actually outlaw the stuff that it did to be all right with it, then everything kind of changed back. But the point is this. I think when you look at the Mann Act, it was not, as ESPN would have you to believe, just something to bust Jack Johnson for traveling with white girls, because it wasn't. Now, I'm sure that there were people out to get Jack Johnson. But I also know this. Even though the society as a whole was even much more racist than what it is today, even though, mainstream news will try to make it look like it's the same, but even though it is much different, Joe Gans was loved by white fans. The reason Jack Johnson was hated because Jack Johnson chose to be hated.
Jack Johnson was liked by lots of white fans. That's actually one of the myths, is that Jack Johnson was hated by all these. There were white people that hated him, but Jack Johnson had a lot of white people who did like him.
All right, so this is my point. Hold on, this is my point, because I was getting to this. All right, this is my point. I agree with you. What gets to my point is this. A lot of white people liked him. A lot of people gave him stuff normal black person or a normal white person wouldn't have gotten. When they wanted to bust him for this, they gave him less jail time. So I think the fact that everybody says this is racial and everybody's out to get him is complete bullshit. He did something that was against the law. He got busted. He got preferential treatment. That was it.
You know, and he even
said 100 years later, he's getting preferential treatment again.
He said even with his career, Johnson's quoted saying that. He said, you know, I had a hard time getting started as a black fighter. They kept telling me to get a reputation. He said, and it wasn't easy to get the fights I needed at first. He said, but when I got them, which is why he was fighting those fighters he did before and then stopped all of a sudden, he got up a reputation. And Johnson even admitted once the people seen I could fight, he said most fans overall supported me. They wanted to see. Yep. They don't want to see no punching bag. It didn't matter if he was a black champion fighting or what. They didn't want to see him go out there beating up a bunch of quote unquote, you know, palookas as they call them. They wanted to see him against threats, which you know, that's why he got bashed in the as far as his ring work. He got bashed on taking easier targets. Jimmy DeForest, who's one of the greatest trainers of all time and trained Jack Dempsey and trained Jack Johnson early in his career, called Johnson out on it before the Ketchel fight. He said Ketchel's tailor-made for him. It's going to be an easy fight, and he said that he put his word that from here on out, Johnson's not going to defend against any threats. He's not going to defend against anybody, you know, worthy. It's just, you know, that's how it is. That's how it was. Johnson's case to me has been twisted more than anybody, from the man to even in the ring. And yeah, he got a light sentence. He got a light sentence even on the case. So I don't see how it can be.
I was just going to say, you know, one thing that Jack Johnson had going for him, and maybe Michael is very disagree on the next point, but when you're a social person, a friendly person, it kind of does possibly go your way. And since Mike's from Cincinnati and I'm from L.A., I grew up a Dodgers fan. He's a Reds fan. So I just love Steve Garvey. But it may turn out that Steve Garvey is more of a jerk than Pete Rose. And when people think
they're both assholes. Pete Rose is just a pedophile to go along with it, but go ahead.
But that might be play a part into causing him more problems. And then if Pete Rose was as beloved as Steve Garvey, that might have played a different part. And that's all I'm saying is that being liked has something to do, and it's not fair. And, you know, you should be a jerk and not have any more trouble than being a nicer social person. And Jack Johnson did have going for him. He was a little more social and a smart aleck with police officers, but a social person. And then if you're more of a jerk, you might get in more trouble.
Yeah, but you know what? If you're more of an asshole, usually you're doing more things you shouldn't do because you're an asshole.
I mean, he did this stuff throughout his career. Well, it really escalated after winning the title and went up even more after he beat Jeffries. It didn't matter if he went to France or England or if he went to Australia. Everywhere he went, you know, people kicked him out. They said the guy's an asshole. He's, you know, Norman Pinder, 130-pound guy, Johnson beat the crap out of him and he stepped on his face and even told the guards, the only thing I'm mad about is I didn't hit him harder. The only reason why he won't charge me that.
I just want to hear what Mike has to say something terrible about France, because I have French friends. But no, France did not kick Jack Johnson out of the country. But I know you.
Why would I say anything terrible about France?
No, what I'm saying is everywhere he went, there's people. Everybody.
If it wasn't for France, we'd have had a hard time getting our independence from British in 1776.
Yeah, true. Thank you. I don't know. You know, that's very terrible prejudice to me, Mike, just to think you hate France. But I've never even talked to you about it, so I apologize for that. That's really wrong.
Yeah, you just assume I'm a racist. But go ahead, buddy.
No, I just assume that I talk to people. I just assume a lot of people hate France when they're Americans, and I shouldn't do that. That is wrong, and that is prejudice on my end, and I apologize.
I only hate him because them guys wear them stupid-ass hats, but go ahead, buddy.
There you go.
What I'm saying is, and there was white fans that liked Johnson, too, during what I think is his, don't quote me on this, I think it's 32nd birthday or something. He had like 50 or 75 white people with a big gathering he had. But, you know. I
don't even have 50 white people that even like me, buddy.
Me neither. So, you know, that says a lot. But, you know, but what I'm saying is everywhere he went, though, there was problems. And it didn't matter if it was Americans or if it was, you know, over in the UK, if it was in Australia. Everywhere he went, he had problems. And they tried, for the most part, where he went to accommodate him. Even after the Burns fight, he goes and gets a bull or whatever removed from the back of his head, and he just doesn't pay. at Melbourne Hospital. He just says, I'm not paying. He did stuff like that all the time. He wouldn't pay tabs. He threatened. He beat. He bullied people.
He went by his own rules. He kind of just did whatever he was going to do.
Well,
and
so the mobsters. Okay. Al Capone went by his own rules, too. I mean, you know.
He didn't get a pardon, though, did he?
Probably not.
Al Capone was a better person than Jack Johnson.
I didn't say he was a better person. What I said was he lived his life. He lived his life by his own rules, like Jack Johnson did. It doesn't mean that they lived good lives.
Right.
My point is that just because when somebody says they lived their life how they see fit, that doesn't mean they lived a good life.
I agree.
Know, it didn't matter where he went. Johnson was, an issue. It didn't matter. It wasn't a racial thing. It was, black writers and fans that.
Right. I was going to say one thing, the racial thing is just that a lot of African leaders were very disappointed in Jack Johnson because if John L. Sullivan acts up, it's not going to be held against the white race. But when Jack Johnson acts up, it defines a lot of African Americans who are trying to do something good with their lives, and they're being sort of, in their mind, they're sort of being penalized a little bit because of Jack Johnson, and that Jack Johnson's saying, I don't have to be a role model. I don't care about being a role model. Well, at that moment in history, maybe you should have been a role model, but he didn't, and maybe he should have been. I don't know whether he should have been or should have.
Well, I mean, he wasn't, and there was those that thought that, Booker T. Washington. But what I'm saying is, it even went beyond that with Johnson. Johnson, he, like I said, he would bully and beat up and intimidate whoever he could. He even went to a dinner. Sam Langford was there with one of his sparring partners, one of Johnson's sparring partners, and Johnson gets pissed off and confronts him about it, and finally Langford, after hearing enough of it, confronts him and says, he's here as my guest. If you don't like it, we can go outside, and basically said, I'll beat your ass, if you want to. And, a whole scene broke out.
What difference does that make? What does that have to do with boxing?
Well, I'm talking about...
There are lots of guys that kick my ass if I wasn't in the ring. They just can't beat me if it's boxing inside the ring. Being a street fighter and boxer has nothing to do with each other.
Well, sure, he didn't want any part of Langford in the ring or outside of it either. But I'm talking just at his confrontation. He was always having issues. It didn't matter where he went. It wasn't just in the States. It wasn't just racial issues. It wasn't just boxing involved. It didn't matter where he went. The guy, raised hell with everybody. He had issues.
He was a hellraiser, I'll give you that. He was a hellraiser.
I mean, even, Hugh McIntosh talked about it. He said when he first met him, Johnson tried to, he basically was trying to bully and swell up on Hugh McIntosh, and, of course, that didn't set over well. But, I mean, here's a guy who's giving you a chance for the world heavyweight title, and you come in there trying to throw weight around. That's how Johnson was.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong about that. See, what you're wrong about that is, I know you're upset about the pardon, and I have no idea whether he should get one or not. I feel like if Jack Johnson doesn't care, why should anyone else? Just do something else. It's just he was a very social, friendly guy. That was his personality. That doesn't mean he was a great guy, because there are people that are reserved, who don't like to talk to people, who turn out to be great people. And there's also people that are very social and charming who turn out not to be very good people. But Jack Johnson was a very social, charming person. That doesn't make him a great person. But you can't say he wasn't social or charming, because he was. That doesn't make him a great person, and it doesn't make him somebody's unsocial and unfriendly. That doesn't make him a bad person.
No, he was charismatic, but what does make him a bad person is, like I said, is for one, beating these women, beating a
There's
sickly.
No proof of that.
There's the testimony from the women, and his wife, Etta Duryea, she literally testified. Not testified. She literally said, she had been confronted by Johnson, and right after they confronted on Christmas Eve, she had to go to the hospital. She was beaten black and blue from head to foot.
Let me say this: that first of all, I've covered John L. Sullivan, and I got a lot of reports about John L. Sullivan beating women, enough that I actually did have to go to Cyber Boxing Zone and say, you know what, I think we've got to mention this. Usually you just mention what they do in the ring. I said, this is a pretty bad history. I think we got to mention this part of his character. With Jack Johnson, what we could know is that we know with Ray Rice that if this thing wasn't filmed, he hit this girl in the elevator. If it wasn't filmed, she may not tell anybody. So it's possible Jack Johnson could have hit somebody and it didn't get reported, but these things are not in the newspapers.
The reports from him, I mean, there's reports from his old lady, his wife, whatever you want to call her, whatever he wanted to call it at the time, of her being going to the hospital. I call her Dirty A. But,
I know you call her that. I know you think about her.
I call her a victim is what I call her. I think she killed herself because of the beatings. She's a white girl who wanted to have sex with black guys. She's a victim to a prostitute.
Really?
I think because she took...
Some women are victims that are prostitutes, and some women, they don't think it's such a bad job. You know, it's a different world out there, how people think.
Okay.
I think she took beatings from Johnson, and she had no way out. As a white woman that was with a black man in that time, she didn't have anywhere to go. Her mother spoke about that. She said she was, you know, castrated out. She said she'd get bashed wherever she went. That was one concern. She said she was too far in to go anywhere else now. She was too far involved to get out, and that Johnson beat her terribly. Her mother said that you wouldn't believe how.
If she hadn't done that, she would have quit prostitution and find a nice white guy, and everything would have worked out great.
No, but you can't excuse the beatings because that's like saying she's a prostitute.
You're talking to somebody that's researched this guy for years, and in fact, when we had to talk with Mike and stuff, I can't even read this text I can't read, and I'm blind because of microfilm. You know, I do all this research of them. I don't do it so much anymore, but with microfilm, and so I've been studying Johnson for years, and believe me, if I've got a rest on Jack Johnson beating women, I'm not going to protect him. I'm going to say, you know what, that's part of his legacy.
Why are they going to arrest a white? Why would they arrest a white woman just with a black man at that time for you know? I mean, why would they arrest him after beating her? She had nobody there. That's exactly what her mother was saying. There's nobody to protect her, and here she is getting beat. And right after he confronted her when he thought that she was messing with the chauffeur, he confronted her, and she goes to the hospital where the hospital reported that she had that her bruises and marks had shown that she had been attacked. Johnson and her later, she wouldn't tell what happened. She refused to talk about it because she was intimidated and scared by Johnson, which is something he was known to do. And then they said that, well, later on she had an accident. She fell down. She was beaten, battered all over. You have to be naive to think that she didn't take a beating from him. And Schreiber was...
Stay away from cyber boxing zone, because when you talk like that, they're going to want to know, they're going to want to see the newspaper, the date, and the proof. So, but if you don't on cyber boxing zone, well, then he's a pimp, he's a wife beater, he's a horrible person. You can do whatever you want, but if you go on certain kind of places, they're actually going to demand you prove some of this stuff you're saying.
Well, I have the newspaper articles for the...
He's going to write an article about it, so... And we got the proof. I'm looking at the dates here, but go ahead.
That they have. I have the articles where the hospital tells them they believe it's
then
attack.
Print the date and the newspaper, and then most people will just believe whatever the hell they write, whatever you read. I'm not going to read it, not because
I know that's kind of the point here.
I don't read other people's stories. I read my own. I have to go to the newspapers, and that's what I do.
Did you write a story about Jack Johnson in 1909, 1909, 1913?
Yeah, I wrote a lot about Jack Johnson. I didn't write for
And in 1913? How did you get your information? Every piece of information you got was from what somebody else wrote or somebody else researched.
No.
Yeah, it was.
No,
it has to be. There's nobody around now.
There's nobody else that could do it, Chris. You got it from a newspaper report, right?
Right, I'm saying that you're right.
So nobody wrote that?
Yes.
Okay, so what we're saying is that I could sit here and look at the Chicago Defender, May 17, 1913, and find that they said he got a fair trial.
Yeah, I have that clipping. I have it. And I have it, too, where Schreiber says that testifies that he beat her as well. Of course, he denies it. And then you go back and look at the reports from Duryea when she goes to the hospital. He confronts her after he thinks she's cheating on him, and she ends up in the hospital with bruises and bumps from head to toe. It said from head to foot. And it says in there, on the article I do have, that they believe, the physicians at the time believed it was due to an attack. There's no way she fell down and had bruises all over. That sounds exactly like somebody that beats women. Tell them you fell down. I mean, you know, and then on top of it, it's like I said, Schreiber, who was alive, she testifies. He beat the hell out of me all the time. Duryea's mother reported it, said that you wouldn't believe how cruel he was to her. You know, she states that in...
The mom complained to the police.
The what?
The mom complained to the police about her daughter's being with Jack Johnson. I'm saying that part is without doubt true.
Right. She reports though, her daughter said, of course, at that time she was dead. But the beatings, and then it's as if it's you don't see a trace of it further down the road. Even Schreiber talks about it. She said he beat her terrible. He was known for it. And intimidating her. And Duryea's mother said the same thing as far as her getting out. She said she couldn't. She felt like she had nowhere to go. So what did she do? She committed suicide, and she was somebody that was prone to depression.
What?
I said his wife committed suicide. His prostitute wife committed suicide. There's no question about that. She's dead.
Yeah, but it's because she got caught. She couldn't go anywhere. She was a white woman that had been with a black man at that time, and she felt that she couldn't even go back home. Her mother even said she would shield her from any harsh things that would come towards her because of that from there. She would keep her from it and to get her out of there. She just felt like she was stuck and she had nowhere to go.
You sure know a lot about her.
I know what's in the papers. That's all I go by.
That's in the papers. I'm sure you're going to force it when you write your story. And I have no problem. I just think that who cares if Jack Johnson got pardoned? Except this has been a pretty good, interesting back and forth exchange and all that kind of stuff. But I just have no agenda in protecting Jack Johnson if he did something wrong involving women, and that I have to say things if I think it's a little over the top or something. And
what's over the top, Chris? That he beat women?
Yes, over the top is John L. Sullivan that I like. I like John L. Sullivan.
I don't know what John L. Sullivan's got to do with this, but
because I was the one that went out years ago before anybody ever did this and said, hey, I think it's got to be in the story, and that boxing historians are protecting men who might commit violence against women. So it's ironic that I'm on the side that allegedly says, hey, what a great thing he was doing. He was a pimp. He beat up women. Oh, it's fantastic. I'm not saying anything like that at all. I'm saying I have arrest reports on that. A, I would either publish it, or B, I'd at least keep it in my private files. I don't get an arrest report on Jack Johnson and just do something else. I put it as nothing else in my own notes.
There was no arrest report when he beat up Pender either, but he admitted right to the cops that he beat him up, and he said that I wish that I hit him harder. He didn't go to trial because, and this was not proven now, I'm just clarifying, it was proven that he beat him because Johnson admitted to it for not buying him wine. He offered him beer and told him he couldn't afford wine. But anyways, Johnson admitted he hit him and said that he wished that he hit him harder. But it's stipulated or, assumed in some of the papers that they believe Pender was intimidated away from going to trial because he didn't show up. That's the only reason why he wasn't charged. But just because he's not charged doesn't mean he didn't do it. Even with the beatings, you have white prostitutes getting, with a black man in that era, they weren't getting a lot of support, which is one reason why the Mann Act come along for these prostitutes.
You're around to give white women prostitutes all the support today. So I hope white women prostitutes are going to be, hey, you're defending them in your article.
Well, I'm reporting what I find. What's there.
You're reporting me fine. Mm-hmm.
I'm reporting what's in the.
I might ask questions about this white women prostitutes that you're defending so fervently today.
Mm-hmm. Sure, they can.
I'm just saying,
I would defend prostitutes anytime because I think everybody ought to be able to do whatever the hell they want with their lives. The problem is when they're getting beaten, when they're getting it done against their will.
And I will say this, agree with both of you. If Ray Rice is not videotaped hitting this woman in the elevator, it may not get reported. And the fact that it's not reported doesn't mean he didn't do it.
It got reported because he was suspended for 2 games for it. It's when the video came out that it ended his
career.
Right,
that works. But the video already. But my point is, it is true that a guy can hit a woman and not get charged. And women, quite frankly, I know women scratch up guys with their nails and throw shoes at them and stuff, and that doesn't get reported. And just because it doesn't get reported doesn't mean it didn't happen. I just have to have a little stronger evidence of something, and that I don't think I protect a legacy. One thing Mike and I do that I really appreciate is that we say, you know what, it looks best like Desiree Washington. Maybe he made a bad decision when Mike Tyson's room, but Mike Tyson probably raped her with history. So I don't think I protect guys that beat up and rape women and pimp them out and things like that. I just think you wouldn't care if he wasn't pardoned last week, buddy.
Yeah, I would have cared. I'm pretty sure I would have. That's why I looked it up a long time ago. And I would say this. I would bet Buddy would care, too, since Buddy's done a ton of research of this over the years also.
Well, I should have had you guys on my side when I had to fight cyberboxing zone to get that stuff into the story, because they were a little unsure whether that stuff is pertinent to a boxer's life. And I agree with both of you that, you know what, if there's something really going on, it has to be at least mentioned or part of the legacy or something. I think it's just really hard just to pretend it didn't happen.
Well, I mean, you have to. I've heard before. I've even had people tell me this. Don't include this. Don't include that. You know, you shouldn't do this. I've even heard, and I heard you say about it on one of the podcasts. And I've heard the same thing about with the colored titles. And I've heard, don't mention them. Just leave them out. That's not politically correct today. I said that doesn't matter. That's history. You can't leave it out.
Oh, I said that's not politically correct, so please don't mention it.
No. You said that they should be mentioned.
Okay.
The title. Yeah, what I'm saying is I agree with you there. I was told not to include them because, you know, it's not, you know, for today. And I said, no, that's not right. You know, and I agree with you. I heard you on a podcast saying it should be mentioned. They should get credit, and I absolutely agree with you there. I mean, them guys fought for them titles. That's just, you know, but, and I've been told this with Johnson. Well, don't mention this stuff. I've been told, don't do that. Don't say this. You know, but and from what I've found is what I'm telling you. What I've seen. I've seen with the reports from the doctors saying, or from the nurses saying that they believed that it was an attack from Duryea when they found her beat up. Well, she went to took a taxi to the hospital by herself. And of course, later on, they come up with a story after she wouldn't tell them who did it that she fell down. And then Schreiber later on in court testifies that she too was beat by Johnson. I mean, you know, you're not going to find video footage back then. This is all we have is the newspaper reports, and you got to put it together like a puzzle. You know, and I believe that a lot on Johnson has been twisted in his favor over time. That's what I believe. I believe a lot. I believe time's hard on some people, and some people is very gracious, and I think he's one of the ones that has benefited from it, both as a man and as the champion as well. You know, and I believe it should be reported.
Well, we both agree that tempting people is wrong and beating them is wrong, so we have no disagreement on that.
Just that who's doing it?
Well, I don't know. They're probably doing it in my neighborhood. In fact, they are doing it in my neighborhood. That's not a joke. There is. They got a lot of drug dealing and tempting and illegal prostitution. I feel very sorry for those on drugs, and that's where I live, so I do know kind of the difference between that kind of stuff. And then when I lived in Tijuana, there were legal prostitutes, and they did a little bit more of their own volition off drugs. I mind my own business.
Well, see, on the women even, at the time, there was one of the judges from one of the court cases I mentioned, the judge, you know, made the remark, he said that, you know, he was asked why wasn't the woman prosecuted as well, and he said it didn't fall under the law, and he said, quite frankly, he's tired of women being used, you know, by men and being labeled out as the bad people. In other words, he's saying these women don't have any rights for themselves. They don't have any way to defend themselves. Some are being forced into situations, some aren't. You know, some are voluntarily. But he believed, you know, for years they were being pushed aside, and that was one reason why he gave the verdict he did in one of his cases. He said he thought that that it was an issue going on, and that's why the Mann Act was in place. These women didn't have anybody to back them up. Who is going to really care about a prostitute getting beat when she's dating a black man in that era? You know,
I would say in any era, I agree with you that a prostitute, if she's beaten or even raped, isn't going to get the same consideration as a non-prostitute who's beaten and raped. I agree.
Yeah, and we've just proved that by the fact that you won't even believe the police or the reports that the newspapers ran 100 years ago.
I believe anything when you got the newspaper and the actual date, because then somebody can look it up, and I'm real good at looking up that stuff, but I'm not going to because actually I don't really care. As I said, the thing is, Jack Johnson wouldn't care that he got pardoned, so these people have been working on this for 15, 20 years, forever working on this pardon, and I think they really should have gone on and done something else with their lives. Except I'm glad we had a good show out of this, so maybe I'm glad we got the pardon just so we could all fight with each other. Even though, Buddy, you seem like a great guy, and Mike and I always get along, except when we talk about the Reds. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. We're going to go ahead and wrap this show up tonight since Christopher's a fucking asshole again. Let's see.
Yeah, that's very nice. How come Buddy isn't? I am. Tell me, what did I do?
Oh, Buddy is too. It's just I've known you longer than Buddy, so I know all the intricacies of your assholeness.
Buddy and I are both jerks. We can handle that. We're going to be friends.
The best part, though, is when one of us disagrees with you, and then you tell us, well, you know more than me, because you've done that in repeated shows in the past.
And Mike, honestly, when I accused you of hating French people, I was really wrong to do that. That was something that I do.
I'm not a big fan of any people, to tell you the truth. So if you guess that about any group of people, you're probably right. That's the one reason I can't be a racist, because I don't really prefer anybody. So
you hate everybody equally. Well, that's good. You do.
Yeah, I don't like anybody. So
I hate everybody.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap this up. Buddy, hopefully you could be on again someday.
I look forward to it. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
All right, Chris, as always.
Thanks,
different, but it's always a pleasure. I want to remind everybody that you can follow us on thegruelingtruth.net. Go to the website there. You can see articles Buddy and Christopher have written in the past about boxing. We cover almost every sport known to man there. Thursday morning at noon Eastern time, I will have up-and-coming heavyweight contender Kenzie Morrison on the show, so make sure you check us out there. I think he just won his 13th straight fight, 13 by knockouts. Of course, the son of Tommy the Duke Morrison, so make sure you check us out Thursday morning. Me, Jeremiah, and John Einreinhofer will be back with Inside Boxing Weekly sometime later this week. You can follow @GruelingTruth on Twitter to be able to find that out. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Buddy Gibbs, Christopher Shelton, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.